Swaithes has over 20 years experience in education, with previous experience including advanced skills teacher, specialist leader in education, assistant head for teaching and learning, and head of PE and achievement for the Youth Sports Trust. Will recently completed his Masters in Educational Leadership and is a senior lecturer in physical education at Birmingham City University, whilst also contributing to PGCE programmes at Loughborough, Buckingham Universities. He's a proud partner of the PE Scholar website, which seeks to bridge the research practice gap and help physical education thrive. So welcome to the show, Will. Great to have you on.
Thanks, guys. Great to be back talking to you both again.
Hey, Will.
Brilliant. So our focus today, Will, is going to be about curriculum design. So tell us a bit about how the current context has changed, maybe your perspective about PE curriculum design and implementation.
That's a big question to kick us off, isn't it? What happened to the intro? And let's just have a chat. Current context. So I guess, I mean, thankfully, I've been able to reach beyond the borders of England, but you know, my teaching career has been in England. So the curriculum and the landscape that I know best is secondary PE, and then I guess is wider education in England. And I think my one word for the landscape is fragmented. Like there is some I don't like the word outstanding because it's associated with Ofsted, but there's some great, there's some amazing, there's some awe-inspiring stuff that goes on in, you know, wider school curricula. So every subject and the way that they package and deliver stuff that's meaningful and relevant to kids and connect with their local context and the community they serve and the types of children that walk through their door. And then in some cases that filters into what the PE offer looks like and how that really has a personalized approach and matters to those kids rather than just being the thing that PE teacher liked when they were at school. But then I guess we've also got an awful lot of, not necessarily stuck in the past, but, you know, lacking that innovation, that drive, that desire, that clarity of direction to go, actually, PE is not synonymous with sport. You know, in great physical education, we use sport as a vehicle to teach children, and the job of school is teaching children first and subject second. So yeah, I just think, what do I think the landscape's like? It's fragmented, and there's no two schools are the same. Like I'm really privileged. Like you just mentioned, I hated the title of AST. But I love the role. It gave me 4 days a week in the school I worked at and 1 day a week on the road. So since 2006, I've spent time in lots of different schools, talking to lots of different people and helping them reflect on their context and what perhaps their kids need more and how they can, you know, co-construct a curriculum that works better for their kids. And I guess now in that kind of teacher educator role, again, I'm really lucky. We were talking before we came on air. I'm probably in at least 2 different schools every week. And whilst I'd like to still be doing some teaching in the school setting, instead, I'm the fly on the wall. I'm the person observing a trainee teacher, helping them unpick whether their lesson was meaningful, relevant, whether it connected with those kids. And they're obviously working within the restraints of what that school deems to be a suitable curriculum. And often that curriculum is designed by someone who loved either their youth sport experience or their school PE experience. And consequently, in a lot of cases, they go back and give the diet that worked for them. So I think we do a really good job of delivering a curriculum suited to mini-me's. And we don't always do a great job of looking at that and going, is this well suited to all children, and have children changed, and what are their needs right now? And I guess that's why I got I first of all got super worried when COVID and first lockdowns hit, because it meant my diary of speaking at different conferences. I was self-employed at that point, so my diary of going to conferences and working with schools and examining for GCSE PE all dried up. And I thought, right, this is either a moment to worry a lot or a moment to kind of put myself out there and try to help what I would be worried about if I was a head of PE. And I would have been worried about Joe Wicks being seen as the PE teacher. And I'd have been worried about how do I prove to the rest of the school that my subject's more important than the others? And how do I capitalise on the fact that Boris and the NHS are saying that physical activity every day and 30 minutes of it is more important than going to work? Like, it felt like a massive opportunity, but that came with that bit of the threat of, when schools reopened, well, the changing rooms are a dangerous place, and throwing a cricket ball at each other is a dangerous thing to do. Well, it gave us that chance, I guess, to like rip up the plan, rip up the curriculum and go, so let's make something different and call it a temporary curriculum, not a recovery curriculum, and then figure out what of it actually landed better with our kids than the diet we gave them before. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but it's my first soapbox moment.
It gives us plenty of exit points. Take us right back to the basics, Will. What is a curriculum, and what does a good one look like?
So what is a curriculum? I guess it's your planned offer, isn't it? And I think if I think about physical education, that is the curriculum, the timetabled opportunity for every child in every school to experience sport and physical activity, and to hopefully fall in love with movement, to learn in, through and about movement. So I guess that the curriculum is, yes, that those timetabled opportunities, and the having sat around that senior leadership table at a school trying to plan a curriculum that suits the students. How much time do you give to different subjects? We actually, at a previous school I worked at, invented an extra period. Well, in fact, no, we stripped some of the other subjects out of the curriculum to offer. We called it life as a lesson, because we wanted kids to be intrigued about what that lesson might be. But we recognised that the students were struggling at the school because they didn't have the skills to do well in school and to do well in life. So we thought, we'll strip out all the content of subjects so we can have some dedicated time to work on some of the skills that unlock their ability to cope with or to thrive in the content. So I guess often we think of what is the curriculum, where it's that planned offer, but it also, and particularly from a PE teacher's perspective, includes that enrichment, the wider offer, the how do we utilise before lunchtime and after school and residential trips, and that, so those kind of wider learning opportunities. I still see that very much as part of the curriculum. And then I guess be rude not to mention the hidden curriculum, the stuff that goes on that perhaps isn't formally taught, or maybe seen by some children and not others. It's that sort of how do we step up to our duties, I suppose, to a certain extent, to challenge some of the stereotypes, some of the thoughts, some of the wrongdoings that have perhaps gone before us, that we can go, or how do we create a culture that really projects that kind of inclusive, everyone matters kind of agenda. So yeah, I guess in my mind, that's what a curriculum is, and the job of the PE curriculum. I think when I started teaching, I came from a sports science background, so I think I'm a part of this problem. I had great knowledge of sports science and physiology and a real passion for my undergrad degree. Very quickly took on leading examination PE courses, great for the people that had that as their career pathway. But I thought that was what my job was about, trying to convert people onto that course and that pathway. But I very strongly believe that content's right for some kids, but not for all. So probably where I made the biggest difference in my teaching was when I started to recognise that my job was to try and get the best teachers in front of those that had a previous negative experience of PE or of sport, because our job is to try and stimulate and get them engaged and wanting to learn more, confident and motivated to want to do more. And I certainly think, I don't think I've ever really felt my job was about trying to prepare talent. I think I've always been quite good at passing that on into the community as soon as I can. But the challenge comes when you've got students that perhaps aren't very engaged across school or aren't behaving very well across school, but they really shine in the PE space. So being in that first 11 football team or first 15 rugby team gives them I guess, identity and credibility at school that they're perhaps not getting in other subjects. So there's a real challenge, isn't there, of, you know, where do you put your efforts? Where can you make the biggest difference? So I think there's kind of three very contrasting areas of the exam pathway into careers in sport, the mass participation, and how do we, you know, I think that's the most important job. How can we light a fire under every child and really seek out the ones that it's not been lit for yet, or that haven't found value and meaning in moving? And then that third strand of, well, if we do have some talented young people, how can we help them see that the resilience they show on the football pitch to get better at that is something that they can transfer to other parts of their life, or the confidence they feel in this setting is something that can arm them and help them.
So having that clear, I like those three parts you talked about, that exam and careers in sport sort of strand, along with those of lighting a fire under them and moving them, which I would agree with you is probably our bread and butter. You know, if we don't do that, what have we achieved as PE teachers? And then the also the talent strand, and that, you know, that 0.1% that do go and make it at that elite level, that are inspired by their PE teacher or their football, rugby, hockey coach, whatever it is that they're playing. You've mentioned a couple of times, and you talked through a really, you flicked between a couple of things around being in the first 11 in the football. You talked earlier a little bit about using sport as a vehicle within PE, but you also were quite adamant that sport isn't PE, if I've listened to you carefully. Tell us a little bit more about that, Will.
I'm just scribbling that down. I'm going to come back to sport isn't PE in a minute, in the same way that personal training isn't PE. You know, Joe Wicks did some great stuff, but it wasn't PE. But just want to pick up on your bread and butter point. So possibly my biggest concern, and I hope we're moving beyond this now, and certainly having spoken to a few people that have had recent Ofsted inspections and deep dives in PE, they are looking at what you've described as the bread and butter, the every child thing. But I think for a long time, the accountability measures on PE departments have been, certainly from a secondary perspective, the percentage pass rates and the, well, what was A's to C's and is now 9s to 5s or whatever. And the big thing that I challenge anyone listening to do, and I definitely say in pretty much every interaction I have with schools, is add up how many students do an exam pathway in PE in your school. So it might be you've got two groups, 50 kids in a year group in year 10 and year 11. Then you might have whatever in year 12 and year 13. You might offer a mix of GCSE and vocational courses and divide that by the total number of students in your school. And typically we end up at somewhere between 5 and 15% for lots of schools. Yet that's where they target all of their efforts, because it's the thing that comes out with a number. It's the thing that they're challenged. You know, it features for a lot of people in their performance management target. So it influences pay progression. So I think that one thing is a worry, that our bread and butter, the thing we signed up for and really wanted to contribute towards, often we're being steered away from that. Now, moral compass is being challenged almost on a daily basis, because the thing that gets measured is not the thing that matters most. And then, you know, I do quite a lot of work with the independent schools through my Buckingham role. And again, the pressure they're under by parents, but also the culture of the school to be beating the other teams at sport, means that their bread and butter isn't the thing that it should be. So I think, yeah, we need to rethink our bread and butter, I think, is the point I want to make on that. Sport, and it's not PE. So it doesn't help that, I don't know, neither of you were probably bothered enough to read, but the government manifestos I had a look at back when I was with YST, when they were looking at change of government, and they genuinely used the words of physical education and sport interchangeably in their documents. Like, I think to a number of people in positions of privilege and power don't see the difference. And I don't think, as a PE profession in England or internationally, do a good enough job of really simply clarifying the difference, and the fact that, you know, physical education is and I think, you know, there's plenty of quotes out there that I like in academia. There's plenty of people's, I guess, trying to live it, not laminate it. So trying to deliver that this PE offer that's more than sport, that's different to sport. We could get into the coaches versus teachers debate as well, couldn't we? And actually, I see an awful lot of coaches who are awesome, who I would say are teaching. To include Gareth Southgate, did some teaching of the country during the way he treated his team and what he looked for from the fans in support of his team. And you use the phrase a lot, they're developing better humans, and using sport as a vehicle to do that. But yeah, I'm yet, again, I often set this challenge. I was at Youth Sport Trust conference on Thursday this week, and I've got into the habit of doing a pub quiz at the beginning of any kind of conversation with lots of teachers. So I get them in pairs or threes, and question one is, if I'm working with teachers from England, what are the 4 aims of the PE national curriculum? It was written in 2013. It's our day job. It's what we're being paid to do. And I know the majority of people work in an academy now, so actually they don't have to follow the national curriculum, but it's kind of a minimum expectation. We're trying to deliver something above and beyond it. And you would not believe how few people are able to recall those 4 aims. Well, if you ask that to a maths teacher or an English teacher or someone in humanities, they'd absolutely know the answer. And their document is a lot more pages than our 1.5 page PE document. So I think we've almost lost sight a little bit of, well, what does it say on paper our job is? And then how much do we align with that as being the aim? Or do we want to create something more better and different? Similarly, I asked the question of, define physical literacy, because it's a term that's bandied around an awful lot. But even by some quite prominent people, they're boiling it down to just fundamental movement skills. And actually, that's the third part of it. And the first and the second parts are around motivation and confidence. And the end bit, which is around valuing and taking responsibility for physical activity for life, is equally important. So again, I'm really lucky. I spend a lot of time with Liz Durden-Myers. She did her PhD under Margaret Whitehead, and she helps correct me and has helped take me on a journey to understand that far better, which has helped me when I'm trying to stand in front of and connect with people and get us, I guess, as a PE fraternity, how can we better coordinate our voice of this is what we do, and at a point that kids would understand, or that sitting around at a table, others would understand that isn't, those that can't teach teach PE, and those that can't teach PE teach the teachers of PE. Like that seems to be the social ladder, doesn't it?
It's interesting. Well, Lewis knows I love this book, the Tyranny of Words by Stuart Chase, because it just boils everything back down to how you interpret words. And you've just reeled off a load of words there: physical education, physical literacy, sport, all mean completely different to every person that's had their lived experience of it. And,
exactly.
and should we therefore just simplify these things, get it out there, and then make sure that first and foremost our students understand what these terms are, that our leaders understand what these terms are, and then we can come back to where PE, I know you love positive experience as being sort of a little catchphrase for PE. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, Will?
I guess that's just an easy and memorable one, isn't it? And I think for me, the challenge around any policy document that comes out, and the reason that 1.5 pages of the DfE's 2013 document is hard to remember is because all documents that come out of government are quite bland and quite type. There's when we're teaching children to remember things, we help them with acronyms and memorable ways. And I think those had a really interesting conversation actually with his name escapes me. It'll come back to me in a minute. From Ontario, who was massively involved in policy document writing for the health and PE curriculum in Canada.
Oh, it's Ted Termological.
No, it wasn't Ted. I have talked to Ted, but it wasn't. I'll remember it in a minute. And that, again, I guess a bit like your book, reminded me how even when policymakers put so much time and effort into trying to get the words right, it's people's lived experience and their, the way they choose to interpret those words that matters. So you can get a great policy document. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get great practice off the back of it. So, the point I was making was our national curriculum in England is out of date, but that's okay. We shouldn't be rushing to try and get a new national curriculum written so that we can follow something else as a document. We've got enough skill within the workplace and enough local knowledge, I think, to be able to work something up that's bigger and better than that. So yeah, if I used to spend a bit of time thinking, if I got stopped in the corridor and asked whether it was by a parent or an Ofsted inspector or the Secretary of State for Education or someone leading on PE, what would my answer of what's PE? And the way I remember it is ask why PE. So we're about developing, I think, attitudes first, skills second, and knowledge third. And that's a challenge in an education system that really values knowledge-rich, ambitious knowledge, knowledge, and more knowledge, and different types of knowledge. And don't get me wrong, knowledge is important, but I think we have a bigger part to play in driving attitudes and values, and then in some of the skill-based aspects of our subject. So that's the ask bit. The why bit for me, very much is around well-being, that holistic development, the physical, social, emotional strands, the cognitive aspects. The H is, when I talk to teachers, the aim that they are most motivated by is the fourth one on the national curriculum, so to lead healthy, active lifestyles. So for me, the H of healthy, active. The why, for me, this is it's a personal one, but I think it's a real one, is why for young people's life skills. So I genuinely think what necessarily PE, actually, because not all of my PE experience as a child was positive, but certainly my sport experience as a child it gave me confidence. I wouldn't be on this today. It gave me team working skills. It gave me a desire to achieve, to approach competition. So I think those things, opportunities, those development points, we should be giving to all children, not just little Will Swaithes. So how can we, give a diet, shine a light on the development of those things, and give just as much praise and reward for when people are demonstrating confidence or work ethic or teamwork or leadership as we do for accurate replication of a skill. And then, for me, the PE bit is it's got to be a positive experience. And I know that that's a challenge when SLT are coming down and doing their learning walk around PE, and fun isn't on the tick list of what needs to be included in a lesson. Enjoyment isn't on there either, but engagement typically is. And we can't get students to engage until they're enjoying and they can see some personal relevance to what they're doing. Again, it goes back to some of the, the 7 meaningful PE aspects that I'm also a big believer in, is we've got to step away from the things that are easy to see progress in, like the overhead clear or the set shot. Like great, if a group's motivated by that, then work on those things, but still make explicit that the other tools they're putting in their box whilst they're developing those things. And then for the students that aren't motivated or aren't motivated yet by getting better at those things, find the things that have currency for them.
It comes back to measuring what you value, doesn't it? And as you've talked about earlier, there's the performativity aspect of it. We have to put a number down or a letter or a grade. Won't we just be better just getting rid of them all? This is an aspect of PE where does it need to be measured? I mean, what do you think about that?
So let's remember in 2013, the 3 big things that I remember from that curriculum change were, oh no, I've got to teach some meaningful dance. And I'm not sure how confident I am or capable I am to do those things. So there's a challenge in itself. The second bit was you've got to deliver some OAA across all year groups. And I thought brilliant, because as you know, I love the great outdoors. I love to engage people in wanting that, but risk assessments to try and do that in a proper way are a bloody nightmare. So a 1 hour timetable orienteering and getting in order on a bench doesn't quite cut it for OAA, in my opinion. And then the third one was AWOL, absent assessment without levels. So since 2013, we've been in a world where we've gone, that was ridiculous that we were telling children whether they were a 5 or not in PE, and what does that even mean? So we were given the freedom nearly 10 years ago in England to not put a number to it, but because a number's put to it in every other subject, and typically it's the head of maths that's gone on to senior leadership that gets data that likes flight paths, they have the role to go, we'll have a data system that works for all subjects. So the challenge is, we've got to find a way to fit in with the kids at the big table. Like PE's always sat at the child's table, hasn't it? Like, we should be proud of that and stay there. But to try and get our seat at the adult table at dinner, we're trying to prove ourselves against other subjects and trying to be, I guess, more accountable, trying to find a measure for the things that we really value in our subject. And it's really hard to do that. And it's also not a flight path. Like, my confidence in fact, I'm trying to return to squash at the moment, having had quite a bit of time off court due to COVID. And I'm hurting this morning because I played last night and I wasn't very confident in what I was doing on court, and I wasn't very competent with it. But I'm motivated to get back into it, and I know and understand what I do need to do to get there, and I value it, so I'll keep working at it. But yeah,
put a number on that, Will. How'd you put a number on that?
Hang on, Will, did you win at squash?
No.
Oh,
But I did win on Monday.
What's the point in playing then?
Well, maybe that's my problem, is I'm more bothered by the good game than the winning game.
Or maybe that's why you're going back to it. Listen, I want to sort of nudge us back towards what we started to talk about a little earlier. You made some really interesting points from Alan's reference of Stuart Chase's The Tyranny of Words, which is a super book. And he talks within that about reference points in your life that then help you to interpret words in certain ways. So having that reference point drives the interpretation. I suppose where I want to go with this is, with the reference points that everybody's got that are so very, very unique across physical activity, across physical literacy, across PE, across sport, they're all interpreted in different ways through people's experiences. We've already established that there is a central document for PE, but because of the context of schools, whether that's to win fixtures or whether that's to create elite athletes or whether that's to make sure that we've got fantastic exam results, everybody's context is slightly different. So we've got a subject that's driven by semantics and a group of words that people don't understand. We've got a central point that is different for every single school, and we haven't got a way to measure it. So how do we even start to create a curriculum that's a planned offer that we know is excellent?
That's brilliant, Lewis.
and that, we're on the back foot, aren't we? Like,
yeah, we're on the back foot. And you know what? You're in a really unique position. And as you've said, very privileged in many respects, that you get to see this in so many different contexts. Alan and I are very, very privileged in the terms of we speak to people that they deliver this in different contexts, and we won't have seen the amount of context that you've seen. But try and give us some ideas of where we can start. What can we do that is under our control that will allow us to actually create a planned offer for our subject that is going to allow students to develop, maybe across those three areas you managed to mention earlier, that exam pathway with careers in sport, that idea of lighting a fire and making sure we do our bread and butter well, and then that idea of, you know, where you do get that top 1%, supporting them to be the talents that we know they can be. We're trying to be a lot of things to a lot of people. What can we do to even start bringing this together?
It's that whole KISS framework, isn't it? We've got to keep it simple, stupid. And before I answer that, I just want to rewind to Alan's question about assessment. Should we even do it? And I just want to put out a health warning of yes, because if every other subject is putting a grade in a box and it's going home, if we don't, we're showing parents, students and school leaders that no learning takes place in our subject. So just a little health warning, if you're thinking off the back of this, maybe we shouldn't assess, like, no one likes summative assessment. No one likes filling out the spreadsheets. And actually, it's not the bit, if you listen to Dylan William, that makes the biggest difference. It's the formative stuff. You know, for me, the most powerful way to assess is to set 3 learning objectives in a lesson. I do it through the ask, so an attitude, a skill, and a knowledge. Lee is looking at the, know, show, grow with Becky. But I like the idea of, if you're not using bibs for the lesson, or if maybe you get some of those rubber sashes, maybe the red objective is always the attitudinal one. The blue one is always the skill-based one. And the green one is always the knowledge-based one. And the job of students in that lesson is to get as many different coloured bibs or sashes as they can through the lesson. And the job of them during the unit of work and during the term and during the year is to collect different coloured sashes or bibs. And I think what we'll find is the same students keep collecting the same colour bib. And consequently, we need to help them understand that's their strength. But their challenge, if they really want to, our job, our success marker is, Lewis, your PE teacher's success measure is the fact that you're doing the job you're doing now. And in fact, it's not about the job you're doing. It's about, are you active every day? Are you still enjoying participation or watching? So I think, we're never going to be able to get outcome measures of what did they do 10 years after leaving school. But I think the problem with the message possibly boils down to head teachers see the title physical education, they have an emotive response to that based on their lived experience. And they also see the title of physical education as the title of our GCSE course, yet what we're trying to achieve in core PE is not the same as what would lead to great success in GCSE PE. So I think...
Sorry to interrupt you, is that because actually what we call GCSE PE, and I'm very mindful, I'm speaking to somebody who's written textbooks on this, isn't actually PE. It's sports science and sport.
Yeah, so if I could have been in post in YST 4 years earlier, or somehow got the right people with a voice around a table to influence DFE when the new assessments came out, I would have lobbied really hard for, call it sports science, and ideally, I'm happy with it being 100% theory and going in the options against physics, chemistry and biology, and leave it there. That's a thing that can serve as a pathway into. But what nobody's done yet is made a qualification for what really is PE. And I'm not sure whether we want that qualification. If you talk to English leaders, they probably feel like their subject's been stifled by the fact that it has an exit certificate, and that at primary for SATs and at secondary for the GCSEs, maybe we're lucky that our subject doesn't have an exit certificate for all.
But it doesn't have an exit certificate, but we're creating one, or schools are creating one, in terms of the pressure and the power they're putting through examination PE and the assessment that they're putting in that, like you said, is important, but not necessarily done in the right way through Key Stage 3. So we have a subject where we have the creativity and the opportunity to be really creative with how we do things, yet we're narrowing our own parameters, are we? By actually saying, well, we need a way of measuring it. We're desperate for a way of measuring it. And the only way of measuring it is to create an exit point, which is examination PE, which isn't PE, it's sports science. And then to create an assessment criteria for Key Stage 3, which we don't actually need, but needs to fit in line with the rest of the school. So again, we sort of making our own, we're making our own issues, but it's coming back to this point that if we want to create and design curriculums in a subject, we have to know what that subject is. And I think we've spent a little bit of time already really establishing that that's very different depending on what the head teacher in charge, as you've alluded to, it's very different depending on what the school measures. And the 3 pathways that you mentioned earlier, I'll come back to again, which I think are a really nice way of sort of illustrating this, is you do have those people that you want to motivate by going down an exam route because they want careers in sport. You do have those people, as we've said, which is our bread and butter of we want people to move well, to be well, to be in a position where they want to be moving for the rest of their life. And then we also have a situation where we want to develop the best talent as well. So how do we start to pull this together, and what's our starting point for trying to create a planned offer that does involve, probably two out of those three things if it's going to be any good, right?
And those pathways are a bit of a solution, I think. And again, we then transfer that into the realities in every school, which is facilities and timetables seem to drive the offer. What teachers do it, how many teachers? So again, I see everything from independent schools with a class of 8 to 12, maybe a bit more, for their PE mornings, and more for their games afternoons. Again, that's another conversation. Through to some schools with 35 in their groups for PE, and lots of schools that can't get away from that idea of setting for PE because they think that then they can create an offer that's better suited. And so, yeah, again, I'm a big believer in student voice does help drive change in schools, and it has to get driven within that local context environment. Like, we can't hold our breath and wait for the next national curriculum because I don't think it's coming anytime soon. But maybe that's a good thing because we can work on something that works in our setting, but that requires that time and vision from PE leads, but also that chance to connect with other people and build confidence in that they're moving in the right direction, in a good direction. But yeah, I think the sooner we can get students grouped by motivation and need and build an offer that suits them and excites them. I talk quite a bit, I mentioned that currency analogy earlier, and I kind of think, sometimes I think when I first talked about this, we were in the middle of the Euros, so I kind of said, oh, well, the Euros are about, winning, about competition, and the dollars, maybe that's about the American dream, about making a career out of this thing. And for me, the diamond and the gold stuff is the stuff that, it's a currency that doesn't fluctuate so much with the stock exchange. So it's, that's the healthy, active lifestyle, the enjoying being active stuff. And then I feel like we've probably got cryptocurrency at the moment, this idea of developing better people, the values, the concepts stuff through PE. And I think at different points in our lives, those different currencies mean more to us than others. And we've got to try and, whether you're teaching that class of 8 to 15 or that class of over 30, if there's more people in that room with you at the same time that have got similar needs and motivations, you really can build an offer that suits what they need. But it's time consuming and it's tiring. So it's something that, again, I think if there ever was a silver lining to COVID, it gave people a chance to step back from and go, I know we all work really hard and we work ridiculous hours and we offer an awful lot, but are we offering it where it's needed most? And are we just doing things, what can we start to do differently?
Why should we put that time in, Will, to start looking at why we do differently? Why don't we have a curriculum that just is a curriculum and that's the curriculum and that's what we follow?
Well, as in, why don't we have a new national curriculum?
Yeah, so let's consider something such as, and I'm not particularly knowledgeable in the specifics, but you look at things such as maths and English, and maths and English have set curriculums with schemes of work that are very clear, with a scope and sequence of the skills that the children are going to learn. And it's quite well versed, it's understood, and you can transfer from one school to another and there's some sort of fluency there. PE, we don't have that. So why is it important that we do those hard yards that you've talked about? Why is it important that we do keep developing and we do keep looking at what our curriculum is, and it doesn't just stick where it is and that's what we follow?
So even in your English example, if you think of phonics as a key learning element in primary schools, there are different franchises that are offering the way to learn phonics. And if you go to one school, you might be on one franchise, which might be a really expensive offer. And then you decide to move, the parent gets a job somewhere else and they move school and the kid goes into another school. The way they learn phonics in a different school can be entirely different and incredibly confusing to a young person. So I don't actually think this challenge is unique to PE. I think there is a challenge in other subjects. Like I know schools that, like I say, with multi-academy trusts and the growth of that are trying to and we stipulate across schools, well, we'll all follow OCR's GCSE PE course, and to get to that, they think helps fix that standardizing of offer and the sharing of resource between schools. But the local context is so different that that spec and the teacher expertise in that spec doesn't suit other settings. And like we've said earlier, that course isn't what core PE is about. So I'll be honest with you, I spend an awful lot of time trying to help the profession with how they critique the situation and where their levers and opportunities are within their school. And I've stopped trying to worry about trying to get the perfect curriculum written at a headline level. I'm quite close to what's going on in Wales with the new curriculum coming in there, and that's got a big push on health and wellbeing across the school. Liz would be able to talk in more detail with you about the underlying thinking behind that, but I'm actually quite interested to see that, I think, far more 21st century curriculum come to fruition in schools, because if that can be delivered with consistency across different schools and with a higher regard for the more well-rounded, the more holistic, the more, I guess, needed skills in people, then maybe it is time for us to write a new curriculum. But I'm not convinced that that mandated change, the document, the policy, helps make it happen.
So
I think it's the people that make it happen.
So does this start with the people and with starting to look at actually where you're at? And I know you've mentioned you've thrown a few things out. Do there need to be some measures and some auditing and some reflection before you even start this process? You talked about facilities, timetables, settings, student voice. There might be just some of those things. Does there need to be that reflection and that opportunity to gather data, gather opinion before you even start to develop curriculum?
Definitely. And I guess, I know you're not intentionally, but that's how I've structured the PE curriculum design course that exists, is around that idea of a 12 steps to really getting under the skin of and upskilling the person to be able to do the thinking for themselves. I'm not a believer in write a scheme of work and a really well-written scheme of work can be kept on the shelf and be brought out and done with all lessons. So if that's how we believe that it's, we need to train hard and train well as teachers to be critically reflective and able to respond to what's in front of us. If that's what we believe in, I do, then we can't give them the thing on the shelf that they can use. We've got to help them. And module 1 is all about understanding your context.
Tell us a bit about those 12 steps, Will. Who does that start with? Who's that person that takes that first step in creating this opportunity?
So from the course perspective, it's aimed at subject leaders for PE. And I guess I see it as the stuff I wish I'd learned during my teacher training, or maybe it's the stuff that I should have done on a middle leader development course, in that aspiring towards a head of PE post or a primary subject leader post. But those courses are typically generic across the school, and it's preparing for middle leadership about leading and managing people. And lots of that stuff is important, but this was more trying to get under the skin of our subject. So the first bit is very much that auditing of your local context by talking to your stakeholders, your staff, your parents, your senior leaders, to see what their belief systems are and what culture currently exists and that they want for, and where your united desire is. I do a lot of kind of theory of change thinking, blue sky, where are we aiming at? But a reality check, where are we right now? And what are the 1 or 2 meaningful things we can do this year that will move us better in that direction? So there's like you said, and capturing all of that insight. And I was involved in a Building Schools for the Future program and designed a really exciting school that then never got built because the funding got cut. So, we've got to work within the restraints of the school, haven't we? I work with quite a lot of inner city Birmingham schools where the facilities are appalling. My trainees go in there and they're like, how on earth am I going to be able to teach effectively in this environment? I'm like, well, that's great, isn't it? Because some exciting stuff can be learned and developed when you've not got a lot. Some of my work internationally, the space and the equipment that they have is not great, but it doesn't mean that the offer's not great sometimes. So that's where it starts. And then I guess in today's language of Ofsted and curriculum intent, but I guess I call that purpose, or I call it ambition of our subject, really trying to get a joined up understanding of what that is, and then finding a way to communicate it that resonates with our kids. So I use the Ask Why PE kind of acronym earlier, but trying to help schools. And I think this stuff's so much more powerful if it's created by your staff. And that's why I think we touched earlier on, how often does a curriculum need to change? My first piece of advice is, I not so much put draft on it, but put version 2.0, like that there is the desire for continued feedback to continue to change this, or maybe it should be version 2022, because you are absolutely clear in the knowledge that there will be a version 2023. And yeah, whilst some of that overarching mission statement, vision, why, language that hopefully will stand the test of time, it's the things that you do beneath that will change depending on the kids that are coming through your door, what they need, what they're motivated by. So that's, I guess, what gets it then into the learner journey bit, and trying to make those meaningful pathways that go, how do we get them in the right lane, or in the lane that suits them? But if they're moving along in that lane through the year groups and they're hitting different milestones for the things that they're developing, physically, cognitive, socially, from an effective domain perspective, how are we making sure they're all still moving in a similar direction? So if someone wanted to change lanes from the GCSE pathway, the sports science pathway, to the participation, or from the participation to, since I've been at this secondary school, I've suddenly picked up lots more hours of physical activity and realised that I'm not rubbish at this. I just didn't have much exposure before. I don't know if you've come across, you read Tim Wigmore and Mark Williams's The Best book?
Not yet, no.
Even Alan's not read it, Will. You've got one there. I don't think I've ever...
I've got it.
Oh yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, done that.
Just looking for it on it's on my Kindle. Very good.
That was kind of in my mind, the follow-on from David Epstein's range and the whole, developmental rounders. But the stats that stood out for me in that were this whole point of, 75% of age group representatives are born within the first quarter of the year. And then once you get to seniors, 75% were born in the last quarter of the year. So actually, we've got to help children understand that, again, if you're going to use Matthew Said's simplification of the 10,000 hours deliberate practice, and again, there's lots of criticism on that, but I genuinely think I want to help children understand how many hours of play before how many hours of deliberate practice have you had before you walk through my door, because that's the thing that is dictating your competence level right now, not genes or or talent in the bloodstream, or it's a bit like the whole multiple intelligence, or even just intelligence as it's not as a kid. I thought I wasn't very intelligent because my older sister seemed to get those genes, well, she didn't. I just haven't found the thing that I was motivated to be good at yet, and probably still haven't. But I found things that I'm passionate about.
Not squash by the sounds of it.
No, you're dead right there.
You're talking very much, aren't you, Will, about prior learning, prior experience, and having an understanding of where the children are arriving at when they come through your door. How much of an advantage do through schools have with that? Schools that do have a primary and a senior school within the same school?
A massive one. So again, if we, there's no point in just ripping up the national curriculum or the education curriculum. We want to rip up the education system, don't we? And if we were, I think, like we were discussing before we came on air, that idea of whether they're on the same site or not, but the primary feeder schools that are really well connected with their secondary school, and that someone has oversight of what goes on that journey from first turned up at the door to leaving and going, whether that's onto university or out into the workplace, or I think there's a massive advantage to that all through setting. And in fact, I guess we're seeing more free schools that are starting to look at that here, and I think that's a really positive thing. Yeah.
Can I come back, Will, to that expression you used about currency, and you used the term hidden curriculum, and I'd like to think it should be front and center curriculum, not hidden curriculum. They're life skills, aren't they? They're essential skills. I've seen it somewhere that they're actually employability skills. And I think it has been taken for granted that, that we just do that through osmosis. It just happens in PE, and it's just taken for granted. Now, you talk there about teachers learning to be critically reflective. Now, where do you even learn that kind of terminology, to be critically reflective? Should we be bringing reflection in to our curriculum? Should we be bringing in collaboration, communication, courage, resilience, relationship? So where I'm heading here is a concept-based PE curriculum the way forward? And I know you've done a lot of work on this, and there's been a lot of debate recently about it.
Yeah, so from a hidden curriculum perspective, I think it's also important to note what we don't say, but is evident in our practice. So I'm pushing quite hard at the moment on, the gendered curriculum, for example, and I think for a long time we've known to be careful about our language, and now the pressure, rightly so, is on it's all, going that step further. I guess Shri would talk about the anti-racist in all of us, but I'm not just going to challenge isms. I'm going to be an absolute ally to pushing that. So I think from a hidden curriculum perspective, we've got quite a long way to go in terms of showing that sport and physical activity and all of them are for all, and we don't have this binary thing. We've got an awful long way to go on that. But on the aspect of hidden curriculum around life skills, I guess my experience of this has come from, I don't know, you guys will remember. Do you remember personalized learning and thinking skills that were in the previous iteration of the curriculum? So my role as an AST back in 2006 was to try and spread good practice around personalised learning and thinking skills between different schools in Nottinghamshire. And I was like, well, I can't do that job unless I believe in them. So I looked at ways to integrate. I called them the secret skills because the S was for was effective participants and creative. Like there were these 6 areas. And I guess, so I started to play around with what that looked like in my PE lessons and how I raised the profile of those secret skills happening in PE. And that's where I think I first started tapping into this idea of currency, because I found some of the students that I'd found hard to reach connected and were motivated by some of those things because it had currency and relevance to them. So for me, the concept curriculum, the debate will stay open for a long time as to whether, transfer of skills is as simple as we'd like it to be. I learned to be resilient in football so I can be resilient in maths, and you know what? Life will never get me down. Like, I think we realise that that's far too simple. But if we don't raise the profile of and explicitly talk about and program these things in to be development points of our subject, there'll be the things that are always caught by a few lucky people like the 3 of us. And because they are not taught, they are not caught by everybody. And I think we owe them to all children. And even if, my empathy is not great. But even if awareness of my competence in these different concepts can be achieved, then that's a valuable thing. And you know what? That's not about giving it a score from 1 to 9 of my resilience that's normative reference across the whole country. It's me self-assessing my empathy versus my leadership versus my creativity to know where are my superpowers and where's my nemesis. And therefore, how do I play to my strengths and how do I find people around me that can help me and hold me to task on and be a part of my team, fill in those gaps. So I think concept curriculum is the future. And I know in the international setting, you've been doing it for a long time, and it works. And for me, it's been working with my classes. Okay, I've not taught 5 days a week since 2016, but I went back to a day a week at the school that I'm an SLE at 3 years ago. Enjoyed a day a week, but I felt like a glorified cover teacher. But I guess what I'm sharing with trainee teachers week in, week out, and then going in and seeing them trying to apply with their classes helps me see that there's definitely something in there in terms of lighting a fire in some students, that if you're trying to develop a sporting skill, they switch off. Like, we're not far away from moving into the summer term, are we, in athletics? And athletics is that one that seems to be taught one discipline per week on a rotation, and the children are turning up and they love or hate it by the word that you say at the beginning of long jump over sand, or long jump, oh yes, I can leap. And yeah, so it's the how do we give something else as well, something more than. And that doesn't mean you don't do long jump. It just means that you create a bit of a frame of reference, or you value some other stuff that's done in that space.
And that lens that you put on it is so important. And I've done this myself, where I'll have a group that I am taking through some concept-based stuff. I've done it more than once. And I'll throw in, just in the middle of a unit, I'll throw in a really sport-specific skill session. And you see the enthusiasm of the kids that are good at sport maintains or gets higher. And for those 3 or 4 kids, great. For every other child in that class, you can see their body language, everything about them just retreats into themselves, just by focusing on, just to throw out an example, you might focus on positioning and rotations and service in volleyball, very sport specific. Why that has a place in the curriculum, I'm not sure, but it's very sport specific. Those same children that do that were the week before focusing on creating their own challenge level of whether they catch or hit, deciding on how they communicate with one another to be able to be effective in getting the ball back over the net. The difference in those children that aren't the best at digging, setting, spiking is just phenomenal to see. And I encourage teachers to try that and to do it.
Yeah. Well, and exactly. And you know what? You don't have to rewrite your whole curriculum to give it a go. You just have concept month. You go, right, what do we feel like a lot of our children have a deficit either in demonstrating or in understanding and valuing? I'm not going to use the word resilient because it seems to be the word that every school wants to try and fix at the moment. But whatever that thing is, whoever you're teaching, whatever you're doing, have a go at talking more about this thing, and see if it connects with people. And if it does, then think, so how are we best doing this? Is it we'll now have a different concept, maybe connected with the school values if you've got them, and we'll rotate them around? Or is it about aligning them with the different activities that you're well suited to develop them in? I think there's a bit of a risk to that. Or is it about empowering your staff to go, well, which of these concepts do your students struggle with the most? And therefore they need a term's worth of time, or a year's worth of time, or a key stage worth of time that they're really focused on to try and graduate from resilience school, or empathy school, or communication skill.
I think you're right, Will. I mean, look, can I just bring in what you used earlier, Lewis, where Will used a really good phrase, and I love this, is that living it, not laminating it. And we hear a lot of, no, it's you've magpied it, haven't you? You've magpied that one, Will. But yeah, if you got school values and a mission and vision, or you've got certain values in your PE department, how do the children know what they are unless you are explicitly teaching it through a concept in your curriculum? It doesn't happen, as I said earlier, it doesn't happen through osmosis. And I think that's where, like the International Middle Years Programme, or the Middle Years Programme of the International Baccalaureate, they're ahead of the game. They've been doing this for years. Yeah. They know that this is important. And I'm just wondering, how does that how do we get the UK with their 2013 curriculum that mentions nothing about them sort of strands? How does that sort of pull together, and how could we learn from the international schools?
It says the word character, and it says
Define character. That's a good one.
So I think one of the other challenges, so I think and it's hard to talk about the UK because actually the curriculum in England is very different to the one that's being worked up in Wales, which is different to the one in Scotland and what happens in Ireland. So I think actually in academia, we talk about UK perspectives, but there isn't a united UK perspective. So let me just talk about England briefly. I think there's some momentum at the moment behind this idea of an extended school day, and a desire for lots of reasons for school to be that place in the community for more wraparound care. Now, unfortunately, the pushback to that is a feeling by teachers of expectation to work more hours, to supervise more children for a longer period, and still have all that marking, all that planning, all that whatever to do beyond those hours. Going back to our conversation about an all-through school being a good thing, and that starting from scratch and building a school, which some free schools are getting right. When you sign your contract as a teacher, you sign up to be a form tutor, and I think you should be signing up to offer an enrichment thing, because it's the first thing that we drop, isn't it? When we get busy, is the science teacher coming down and helping with my rugby or football team. It's the first thing they drop. It's the nice to do, is the helping with the growth of children. And I just think if we built that into the contract somewhere, and it's not so much about the contract, it's about the culture of the school, whereby the teachers that are there are able to give time to investing little people, not just delivering their subject. But it has to be fair, because otherwise you have what I see an awful lot of, which is PE departments on their knees because they've got a relatively small team, some of whom have, because of the life skills that we developed, become heads of year, senior leaders, and their attention starts to turn to the thing that, the readmittance meetings and I found that really hard in my post of how do I have that perspective. And I think it is really important to, walk in the shoes of a senior leader to see that broader perspective of what is going on around a school, and, from a safeguarding to other subjects perspective, while still maintaining that integrity that goes, what, if everyone is given the autonomy and takes responsibility for really doing their job well, we don't need to do so much of the accountability and all of the stuff that nobody likes. So I quite like the idea of establishing a new school with a fresh start that really drives a culture for that teaches us providing lots of meaningful experiences, not just 1 hour segments of different subjects that are collected together on a thing called a timetable.
That's a good point. Right, let's wind it down with some fun now. Will, you've probably heard this before on our podcast. 3 leaders you'd love to have evening meal with and have a good chat with, dead or alive, Will.
So I actually quite enjoyed dinner with my nephews because it's fun and it takes my brain away from. So I'm not sure I'd go with leaders. But if I was to go the leaders thing and to follow the pattern on this, I also think I wouldn't want to sit down for dinner with them. Like I like adventure and excitement. So I think I would probably, a League of Their Own and the daft challenges that they do on that, or Top Gear. I'd want to take those couple of leaders to really get under the skin of them in an environment that enables them to be human.
It's like Bear did with Obama, didn't he? Bear Grylls went on a walk with him. That was superb.
Yeah, well, there you go then, because that's how you get them out of their comfort zone, but also a different environment. You get to see the real person. So if that's what I was able to do with them rather than a meal, I think we're all fans of Simon Sinek, aren't we? I definitely get the man on a boat or in a car or whatever the thing is that we're going to do. From a political perspective, I think probably Jacinda Ardern, like how she's able to do the work-life balance, and the, you know, from a distance seems to have made lots of good decisions and being human about it. And then my brother-in-law's South African, so I spent quite a bit of time in South Africa and love rugby. So I think probably Khaleesi, and what he's doing around, you know, from the townships to captaining the South African rugby team, and what you can do with that. So probably those three to answer your question.
Or to not answer your question, to answer your own, which brings me to my next question, and I'm not going to ask a question as such. I'm going to offer the opportunity for you to ask a question. If you were on your boat ride, your walk, or whatever it was, to those three people, what would be a question that you would like to ask them?
For me, it's that, how do we make the world a better place? That's a huge question, which is why it's a good job we're going on a long adventure. But yeah, and try and get them to nail down what one thing will make the world a better place. Yeah, that's what motivates me to keep getting up in the morning, I think.
Good man. Last one then, Will. If you were to hire a billboard at the side of a busy motorway, what would you write on it for the world to see?
Adults and children. I think probably that, you know, to do well, you've got to be well. I'm a big believer in if we don't look after ourselves and each other's well-being, and my big thing to teachers at the moment is if you can't look after your own and remember to switch off and take care of yourself, you're going to be in no place to look after other people. And in the place of children, you know, unless you look after yourself, you won't do well at school. So that kind of Maslow before Bloom thing.
Top man, Will. Really enjoyed the conversation today. Thanks a lot for all your insights and your opinion. If people want to read a little bit more about you, about the work PE Scholar do, about your views and opinions on things, is there a place they should visit? Website, Twitter handle, etc.?
God help them. This is probably enough. But yeah, no, you said it all. PE Scholar. So we try to put out a piece of insight. We're inviting, as you two have, guests to push some blogs out. We don't just want, nobody wants too much of my opinion or Liz's opinion, but we want to, you know, provide a voice and a space for lots of people to talk, but also try to provide, you know, courses, resources, materials, things that I'm not even going to use the word upskill, but things that arm the profession to be better custodians of it. Like, I really like that all black thing of, you know, leave the shirt in a better place than you picked it up. And I think we need to leave PE in a better place than we picked it up.
And it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done on that. Will, thanks a lot for your time, pal. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, gents. Have a great day.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.